Well, hello and welcome to this presentation of Acumatica to you who are members of the food and beverage or hospitality or health and leisure industries. My name is James Morgan. I'm from a company called Tascoli, and I'm very pleased to be able to take you through this presentation, which should last about 25 minutes. And I hope it gives you enough information to really see that Acumatica is a very good ERP system for your business. Well, first, Acumatica. You've probably never heard of the name. Often in the UK, nobody knows who Acumatica is, or even how to say the word. So we've discovered it's Acumatica. But who is Acumatica? Acumatica is a business that is based in the States, offices in Seattle, and they make one product, which is the Acumatica ERP system. It was developed about 9 years ago, and it is a system that is, they call it born on the cloud. So it was developed for the cloud. Even though it's a US-based company, the application is designed for use all over the world. So there are already fairly large user bases in some far-flung countries like Australia, countries like Scandinavian countries, Germany, the Far East, and a growing number of users in the UK. Well, it doesn't just mean that they've got many users around the world, but also they've got lots of offices around the world. So as you can see on this map below here, there are research and development, there's engineering offices spread across the globe, as well as support and sales offices. As you can also see, Acumatica have just recently received an award for being the fastest growing ERP cloud application. So that is quite staggering for a business that is only so recently really on the market. 9 years is not a long time to develop an application and have such a great track record. And it also means that Acumatica now have 3,000 customers. When I say customers, those are businesses, they're not users. It's actually 3,000 customers. What about Acumatica, the product? That's the most important thing. Well, it is a fully web-based application. So that means you run it on a browser. You don't need anything else. So you just come to work, or you don't come to work, you just connect through the internet on the browser, and that's how you access the system. Acumatica does also come with a whole lot of mobile applications, which they're adding to all the time, and those are specific mobile applications. But you could also obviously run Acumatica on your smartphone just through the browser if you wanted to. But it doesn't matter what device you use, Mac or Windows or a tablet, it doesn't really matter. I mentioned that they are based in Seattle, and they're very close neighbors of Microsoft and Amazon, and that's not just a geographical closeness, it's also from a technology point of view. There are very close links with Microsoft and with Amazon. Microsoft mainly on the Office productivity side with Outlook and Exchange and Office 365, but also in Power BI, the business intelligence application of Microsoft, which is really gaining ground. Direct links into those applications. And then on the Amazon side, it's links to obviously the server, the cloud provision, but also some of the Amazon services, the retail services that have got strong integrations. Okay, so what about Acumatica? Well, Acumatica is a fully fledged ERP application. So that means it's got all the financial modules. So in the States they call them general ledger, accounts receivable, accounts payable. We know them as nominal ledger, purchase ledger and sales ledger. But it's got all those, including things like deferred revenue. It's got things like contracts. It's got things like projects and time and expenses. There's a fully fledged CRM application that's built into the application, not like these other titles that we're aware of, where the CRM system is not really the same application. So it looks different, it costs different, and it's a different system. There has to be a synchronization. CRM is already built in, and that really makes life a lot easier. It's not just CRM for customers, it's also for suppliers, which could be good for your business too. There's also a manufacturing system, there's a field services application, and all of these applications are delivered through the Acumatica system, through the browser. There's no extended system, there's no separate thing you've got to click on your desktop to run the application. It's all within the Acumatica application. Now, there are two key differences, and there are very strong differences between Acumatica and everything else. And the first is that Acumatica, although it is a cloud-based application, which many people will recognize means SaaS, software as a service, which means you have no software on your servers. All you do is you just sign up, pay the money, and you just get a URL and you just manage it that way around. It does that, it provides that, but you can also run the application and have the database all on your own server. Still, it's a web-based application. So obviously the server is running web services and internet services and so on, but everything is contained within your own server. So we've had a few clients who are still a little bit concerned about having all their data and all the security and everything else run by somebody else. And often it's a system that is, you know, it's a location that is probably outside the country just because of logistics or whatever. They prefer to have it internal. So you can run Acumatica on, they call it on-premise. And that is a fantastic feature. So you can take you get the benefit of the technology without really getting into some of the risks that some people just don't want to take of having direct, you know, relying on the internet totally for your processing. So that's number one. Number two is the pricing of Acumatica is not based per user, and that's amazing. And I'll tell you why. It's because you'll often find that if you add a new members of staff into your finance department, or typically in the sales department or the purchasing department, very often they need to get some information out of the system. And ideally you'd like to give them access to the system, but when their user access is going to cost you 40, 50 pounds a month, you think twice, because you think, well, that's quite a lot of money, and maybe they could just get that information from somebody else who can drop it down from a spreadsheet and so on. And so that's so limiting in terms of really making proper use and being really efficient within the systems. So Acumatica is not, it doesn't cost you anything to add another user. Similarly, you could have people who need to put information in, or you think, well, maybe there's some people even outside the organization who may be able to put in, I don't know, some transactions or get information out of the system, and normally it's our accounts department that have to do all that. Well, that's a brilliant thing about not being user-based pricing. It's based on CPU, which is more a performance-based thing, but it's not going to cost you anything more for adding additional users. All right, so let's get into where does Acumatica sit compared to other applications. A lot of people say to me, James, I like the idea, but I've never heard of Acumatica. How do I know? You know, what is the product? How do I know how they compare with other applications? And particularly in the UK, you don't see any ads or anything like that with Acumatica. In the US you do, and they're trade fairs and so on, but in the UK we don't have too many of those at the moment. Well, this is a graph that I've just brought up, which is done by an independent research company, and what they do is they just plot on the y-axis functionality, so it goes along that, and on the x-axis usability. And they've analyzed a number of applications. They do it each year, and they just generally look at those two things: functionality, how many features, how many functions it's got, and then how usable is the application. And you can see that Acumatica is very high on the usability axis. In fact, I believe it is the highest, just by a smidgen, but it is the highest on usability. What they also do on these analysis is they put they dissect the area into quadrants. So you've got four quadrants, and this top quadrant over here becomes the leaders quadrant. That's where you want to see all the leading applications are sitting in that quadrant: high functionality, high usability. And I'm pleased to say Acumatica is in that quadrant. It's going to move across into the functionality. You can see the direction of travel there. But what's also interesting is you can see some of the other titles, you know, and they're not doing so well. They are a little lower on this graph. But that really is our experience of Acumatica. Whenever there's a system comparison, or wherever any other article comes out looking at different systems, Acumatica is always there. So it's really made its presence known and felt. Okay, just a few things about Tascoli. I'm a director of Tascoli. We're a company that's been based in London, in and around London, for more than 20 years. And we provide the implementation services, the support services, in helping businesses put in their ERP systems. Our tagline, as you can see at the bottom there, is our passion is your business efficiency. Well, and that's true. We really want to make sure that what we suggest, what we design, what we help is going to make you more efficient. That's the whole point of systems. We don't like it when a system makes you inefficient. And I hope we do say that. We do say that, actually. We don't like that situation. We like to see systems being efficient and making you very efficient. So we have people on staff who are good on accounting, who are good on project management, who are good in system design, system architecture, good with the technology itself. and training, and we also do a lot of ongoing support to continue with that, to make sure there's always lots of fine-tuning and tweaking and changing, and you'll come up with some new ideas about how the system needs to be done, configured and changed, and Acumatica is very good at that, and that's what we do. Typically our businesses are medium-sized businesses. When I say medium-sized, I'm probably talking about 10 to 15 million turnover, although we've had some clients that are probably 10 times that size and some clients that are a tenth of that size. Turnover is often a good way to measure it, but often it's not so much about turnover when it comes to systems, it's often about the complexity of the business. Some big turnover systems are very straightforward and they don't need much, but we found some of the smaller systems need quite a lot of additional features, like the sort of features you get into Acumatica. And in our time of supplying software to clients, and we've dealt with a number of major titles, Sage, Excel, Sage, Microsoft, a number of other software applications. We have had experience with a number of business sectors, and one of them is the food and beverage, health and leisure sector. So we just put down some names down there, TGI Fridays and David Lloyd Leisure as two, Rishu Cafes as well, where we've spent a lot of time. We've had them with clients, and we know what it is, what the challenges are in those businesses, and what you really expect, what you need out of the ERP system. So what we want to do now is, what are the 7 things that we believe you need in an ERP system, and why Acumatica can provide those. So number 1, it's very simple. You need, and we believe this is the top thing, you need a chart of accounts that has got multiple segments. At the moment, many of you have only got 2 segments. You have an account code, you have a department code, and you have a region code. And that's simply not enough. You need more segments. More segments means more analysis. And if transactions can come in that have built up those segments, then it's so much easier to look at it rather than having to drop things onto a spreadsheet, reanalyze, and so on. So that's what we believe is the very first thing you need. Second thing is you need a system that is built for integration. In your business, which is quite peculiar actually compared to other businesses, distribution and others, you have a lot of front-end systems that are unique. Things like point of sales, things like membership, things like booking systems, things like check-in, check-out, things like loyalty schemes. A whole lot of really good front-end systems, or what we call front-end systems with the ERP system sitting in the back office, that provide a lot of value to your business. And we've also noticed that there are very few ERP, in fact there are no ERP systems in the mid-range that really cover all of this and do it really well. And there are very good systems that are out there that do just that, just one of those things, point of sale or membership or one of those things. So typically what you've done is you've taken the best of breed, the best system in each of those areas, and you need to integrate into your accounting system. You're probably doing that already, and some of the integrations are neat and they work well, other integrations are not so great. So what you need in the ERP system is a back-end of accounting system that has good integrations, because all of these systems have some sort of impact financially. There needs to be some sort of financial transaction, or they need to get some financial information out, and Acumatica has that. It's got a whole section just for integrations. Okay, number 3 is a quick one. If you've got good segmented data capture, you need good financial reporting and good management reporting. Acumatica, as I said in the beginning, you don't have to have pricing per user, so it means you can have many users, so many more people can have access to the system. It's not going to cost you anything. That boundary is broken. And also you've got a reporting application that is complex. It's got a lot of functionality. In fact, it's one of the best we've seen, but it's also possible, it's quite feasible for your staff to write those reports. You don't have to rely on consultants to be able to write those reports or queries or dashboards. So that's a great thing. You get really good financial and management reporting out of Acumatica. Number 4, a number of you will be, and you do, have quite a lot of capital expenditure. You've got refurbishments, you've got new sites, you've got all of these sort of capital costs, and you need to have somewhere to approve all the costs as they go forward. You could even add projects onto it, so you could keep track of the expenses, keep them work in progress if you need to, and then move it into some sort of assets for depreciation later on. But you need all of those. You need approvals for each of the expenditures that are going on, and Acumatica's got a built-in purchase approval application. Number 5, you probably don't think you need this, but we found that every client that has Acumatica really relies on this, and this is an internal communication within the system. And the concept is that any account, any transaction, anything like that, has the ability to have activities against it. So an activity could be an email, it could be a query, it could be a note of a phone call. All of these things are recorded against the transaction. So if there's a query on an invoice, then you send the email from within the transaction to the supplier, and then when his response comes in, you bring it back in there. If there's an internal communication, it all happens within there. If there's something that you need to have followed up by a certain time, then tasks get created. And that's really good because it keeps it all in there. It's not in Outlook, it's not in Skype, it's not in post-it notes, it all stays within the system. Number 6, a strong payment approval process. Well, that's really key. We've noticed a lot of systems have got something but it's not ideal. In Acumatica, you've got essentially two steps to invoice payment. One is the approval process, and that really just says the invoice is okay. I agree to this invoice, it's fine. But it doesn't mean to say it can get paid yet. Paying is a sort of a treasury function in a way. It's have I got the money and what's the due date and so on. And many ERP systems actually do the same thing at the same time. So that's a problem. But Acumatica has a payment approval, an invoice approval, and then a payment approval. And that's so useful. So the people who need to approve the invoice are the people out in the field. The people who need to pay the invoice are probably the people in accounts and do that sort of treasury function. What we've often found, and you may see that as well, is often if there's a query on an invoice, then it doesn't get into the system because the system just is built in such a way that once the invoice is in, it gets paid. And you don't want that, because then suddenly when it comes to month end or year end, you've got all these invoices that are sitting on desks and they never got in. You've got to create accruals and all that sort of stuff. So this makes it so much more streamlined and efficient. Number 7, expense claim processing. We noticed that this is something that takes quite a while for the accounting staff. Typically the expense claim people who claim expenses are executives or managers, so you've got to attend to their requirements, and they send things in by spreadsheet or email, and there's a lot of work that has to come down. You've got to analyze credit cards, for instance. But Acumatica has got its own mobile-based expense claim application. Now you've probably got something like that already, and that would need integration, but why not use the Acumatica expense one? Saves time, and they can see exactly where their claim is within the process, which is fantastic. Okay, so those are our 7 reasons. I hope that they are very valid reasons, and hopefully they are close to what you want. If not, then please let me know what they are, but let me go and show you how we do that within Acumatica. So we're going to have a look at the system now, and it's on my screen on the side here, so I will be turning across the screen, but I will look back at you. And what I want to do is just show you a little bit around Acumatica, so at least as I move between the screens, you know where we are. It's very frustrating sometimes, I know, when you have a look at a new system and people are jumping around, clicking, and you really don't know where you're going. So I just want to make sure that doesn't happen, and then we will have a look at each of the features. Shouldn't take much longer. All right, so what you've been looking at is the typical screen that you land on when you come into Acumatica. It can be personalized to whoever you are, and you can put dashboards and widgets and queries and things like that. They are things that you create, so they're not canned. They're not just 10 dashboards. You create them. You can put, as you can see, there's a Bing search engine there, so you can have web pages within there. You can have links to Power BI. You can have links to spreadsheets. It's a nice big panel, really, where you can put lots of information. So I'm not going to go into any of these too much, but I'm just going to talk about the top sections over here, the menu. So you can see we've got finance, distribution, configuration. As I change each one of those, you see the submenus have changed. So you can see under finance, for instance, we've got general ledger, cash management, accounts payable, accounts receivable, fixed assets, deferred revenue, and all those sorts of things. Now, you'll notice that only once I've selected, or once I do select a submenu item, nothing changes in the main screen. But it's only when I go down to the bottom here and make a selection that something changes. So in other words, if I select on vendors, then you can see now I'm out of that screen and I am in the vendor screen. Now I happen to be on one of the tabs, which is the work tab, and there are 4 tabs. There's the work tab, there's the process tab, the reports tab, and the configuration tab. So it's fairly simple to get around if you have that concept. I didn't also talk about any of these little arrowheads you have over here. That just moves your screen to the left and to the right, so it just gives you a bit more space if you happen to have if you need more space to have a look at a transaction. So you see the little arrowheads around the place. Okay, so that's essentially how we move around. Now, what Acumatica has got is the concept of favorites, and I'm going to use favorites. To establish a favorite, you just got to go to the screen you want and just click on that star there, which was grey, but it's now gone gold because I've selected it, and under the favorites, you'll see that I have all of my favorites, the things that I want to talk about. So you can see I've got chart of accounts, branches, sub-accounts, journal transactions, all of these things that I want to talk about. So I hope that gives you a quick overview as to how to get around the screen. I hope the screen is big enough. You can, on the system, of course, you can change it, use the browser controls, Control Plus, and that increases it, Control Minus decreases it. So that's really useful depending on what sort of screen you have. But I hope you can see that. Okay, so number one, remember the first thing was the chart of accounts. Well, this is an example of the chart of accounts in a demonstration company. But it's fairly simple. It's typical of the way we set up the chart of accounts. So the account itself is just the natural account. There's nothing else. There's no subcodes that are connected with it. It's just the account. As you can see, we've got some typical account codes here, and I can just cycle through, and you can see a number of accounts. So that's fairly standard. Nice and simple, just the count, almost like the line in every P&L balance sheet. Essentially, that's the account. Okay, the other thing I didn't really mention is Acumatica has this concept of branches. So not only do you have accounts and sub-accounts, but you also have branches. And within a branch, you can have it self-contained, you can have it part of the greater organization. But branches are really good because what you could do is you could say each site or each club is a branch. And you can configure it, in fact, so it even has its own customers and suppliers, and there's even inter-branch transactions. So you may even treat them as separate companies. You could run them as subsidiaries. But that's one of the ways in which you can run things and have a separate analysis within a branch. As you can see, I've got a Virginia branch, and we've got general information. I've got separate general ledger accounts. I can have a separate logo that comes in. So anybody logging into this branch would see a logo. So the Acumatica logo, you'd see that logo. I can have separate employees that only work within this branch. Okay, so sub-accounts. What I've got here in the sample data is 3 sub-accounts. As I said, it can be as many as you like, but I've only chosen 3 over here. And you can see that I've created these sub-accounts. I've got a product group, I've got a department, and I've got a site. Now, it's very simple to create a sub-account. You just click on plus. You type in what your account group is. Let's say I wanted region. Over there, I can spell it correctly, and I can say what the length is. I can say maybe 6, and whether it's uppercase. Well, I need validation, anything like that. So it's really simple to create. I'm not going to worry about that because I've got to then populate everything with a sub-account. But I hope you get the understanding. It's so simple to add a sub-account. Okay, now if I wanted validation, then it means I've got to have a list of values per sub-account. So here's my sub-account with the first segment, which was the product group. And here you can see these are all the sub-account product groups. So when I do a journal or if I've got any transaction, these are the sort of permitted values that can go into that first segment. I can do one for the second segment, which is the department. And here you can see I've got corporate consulting, finance, and a whole lot of others. And I also earlier created a department called Site, which is more in tune with your sort of business. So I've got a 00 is just a default, but I've got a Heathrow site, I've got a Manchester site, and a Sloane Street site. So these are restaurants. Okay, so those are the segment values. So what does it look like on the journal? So I've got a very simple journal that I've set up over here, and you can see this is a US dollar demo company. I apologize for that, it should be sterling, but it's a multi-currency system, so the principle is much the same. But if you could just have a look at the 2-line journal that I have down here. So I've got an account code 62400, which is for office expenses, and the other side of the entry is 11010, which is going to an accrual account. It shouldn't be AR accrual account, probably AP accrual account. Don't you hate it when sometimes there are demonstrations and the accounting entry that is presented is such a weird one? It's like debit petty cash and credit cost of sales or something. Anyway, mine is sort of weird, but it's not too bad. But the most important thing I want to show you is on the sub-account section. So here I've got a sub-account that is made of 3 segments, and there you can see the 3 segments. So if I want to see what those segments are while I'm doing the data entry, I've got a function key here, and that just press F3, and it brings up my site option, so I could Heathrow, Manchester, Piccadilly, whatever. So it shows you on the expense line, I'm interested in seeing my sub-accounts and I want to see that that split. But on the balance sheet account, I'm not bothered about that sort of expenditure type classification, so I'll just make it 00, it doesn't matter. So there you can see over 150, 150. So that's what it looks like on the journal transaction. Now you might say, well, that's okay, but I've got to manually enter all those segments in every transaction. Well, no, that's not the case. In Acumatica, you can set transactions, you can set suppliers to automatically filter through those key sub-accounts. So what we have here is we have a supplier, Etic Food Supplies, and this is what our supplier or vendor record looks like. And you can see we've got a number of different tabs: general information, payment, purchase settings, and so on. The one I want to show you is general GL accounts, and under GL accounts you can see here's my expense sub-account. So what I'm doing is I'm setting it so that every time I have a purchase from the supplier, this might be the reason in this case, it might not be in your case. Maybe we've got to link the default expense account to a project or to the item itself. It doesn't matter, there are so many different permutations, but this is just an example. So I'm just saying when I have an expense from the supplier, I wanted to go to the, that looks like it's the Heathrow site, and it's going to the PUR, I think that is purchasing product group, I think it was. So that automatically goes in. So you don't have to worry about doing any journal entries to populate that information. It automatically goes in. That's the key thing about Acumatica. Once you set it up and configured it, you should never have to do any segmented journal entries unless you want to do a journal entry to reanalyze or put some other transactions in there. Okay, while we're sitting on the supply stage, I just want to show you the one thing about the communication. So one of the tabs here is activities, and here's an example of an activity. It's slightly in the latest order. So here's an activity at 12:10, and the first activity was 12:06. So the first activity at 12:06 was a task, and it was a task, as you can see at the bottom here, a reminder to get new bank details. So this is a supplier, and I need to get new bank details for them because we're putting them on our back system. And a task was created. Now, actually, the task was created for myself. You'll see that a little bit later, but it could have been for anybody. And about 4 minutes later, I decided to do something about it, and I sent an email. So this is actually an email. I chose add email, and I sent an email from within the system that said, "Dear Terry, we've recently changed our system. You're now requested to store bank details." So that went out. So that was an email that went out to Terry. So as you can see, all of this communication stays within the system. Now this could be, it applies to transactions, it applies to everything. They can all have activities, and that's really useful. Okay, so moving on, financial reporting. I said that is really important. So what I want to do is I'll just show you what the financial report looked like for a profit and loss account. This is one of my favorite reports to show. I just like big analysis reports. So here's a P&L report. I'm just going to get some more space. Here's a P&L report that shows profit and loss, and it's a P&L report that breaks it down over 12 periods, rolling 12 periods. But I can have anything. I can have actual versus budget, this month, last year, anything. It's entirely up to you. And everything, in fact, on this report is entirely designed by you. So even the background, we've had some clients who really wanted pink as the background behind their reports. We chose white, which is good. But as you can see, the fonts and everything else can be determined by you. And these are click-through numbers. So all the blue ones are hyperlinks, and they just click us through back to what's behind it. So it could be the account and the department information, then go beyond that. And I can get down to the actual transaction. And even if I then can see the communication on the transaction. I can see the attached document on the transaction. But the thing that I want to show you is, well, you can export that. You can export it to Excel, PDF, whatever. You can send it by email straight from here. You can print it, of course. The thing I want to show you is this groups option. So I can set this up so that this report actually just bursts, it expands by those segmented accounts. So what I've done is I've done this and I've managed to burst this by, in this case, this is by branches. So okay, I've only got 2 branches, not too exciting, but if I click on the subsidiary, there you can see I've got a much trimmed down P&L. But you can have all of these bursts by different things. They could be by region, by product set, anything like that. It's very simple just to create that. So that was the financial reporting. But of course, this report can be just on somebody's desktop, on somebody's workspace within Acumatica. All they do is they log in. Maybe that's all they can see, and they can run it. So it's really useful for distribution of reports. And you can schedule these reports too, and you can send them by email, but it's much easier, just put it on the website and people can see it, the Acumatica site. Okay, so that was the profit and loss report, and there are many reports. You can create balance sheet reports and P&Ls and everything. There's a whole function and formulas within these reports, so there shouldn't be anything you shouldn't be able to report out of there. Purchase orders, I just want to show you the approval process. So here we have a purchase order, It's a purchase order for an Acer laptop. That's important. Somebody's getting a laptop in the organization. And behind the scenes, we've created an approval workflow that says that any expenditure, I can't remember what it is, but maybe it's expenditure over 500 for a particular department or for a particular expense type, needs an approval. So all I want to show you here is that this actually is approved. There's a tick in there that's approved. The status is closed, which means we've actually received the invoice and it's all okay. But you'll see over here, there's a tab that tells me what the approval details are, and that tells me who approved it. And in this case, there were two people who approved it, Mrs. Layla Beauvoir and myself. I'm Baker Maxwell. In fact, she must be Beauvoir Layla. That looks a bit odd. Anyway, so you can have multiple approvals and different people who approve the PO. All right, remember I talked to you about tasks. Well, these are my tasks. These are all my open tasks. I'm logged in, as you can see, by admin, but in fact, that's my username. The employee name behind here is Baker Maxwell Baker, and these are all my tasks. You can see that this task that I created for myself about getting new bank details for Etic, which we saw earlier, has gone red because it should have been done by the 14th of September, and we're already on the 26th, so it is overdue. Now, I can click on here, and that'll take me straight through to that account where I can type in the details. So it's really quick and easy to do. So if there was any other transaction queries, anything like that, somebody gets a task to do something, they just click on it. They don't have to go and look and search and find it. But it also just shows you that we can have a look at work groups. So I might be part of a work group. I am a part of a work group, a very useless work group because they haven't done anything here. So many overdue tasks. But the concept is that while people are away, you can attend to the tasks that need to be done. And I can see my tasks and so on. Okay. Payments of invoices. So remember I said there are two processes. So the first process is just approving the invoice for payment. In Acumatica's terms, it's bills. And this would typically be somebody who is responsible for this particular invoice. You can have workflow. You can decide who that is. It could be based on the supplier, it could be based on the branch, it could be based on whoever put it in the first place. But they have a screen like this, and they see all the invoices that they need to approve. And it's just a matter of having a look at this list and just going through and ticking each of these off to indicate that they approve that for payment. Very simple. And they can click through and they can go and have a look at the invoice. They can see what's behind it, and they can raise notes and activities if there are any queries. I haven't really talked about it, but just on the left here, if you can see, that's a place where you can put in notes. So you can put any sort of note against the invoice, just a sticky note or something that also helps, and the little paper clip is an attachment. So if you wanted to see what the invoice looked like, the actual PDF copy that you got by email, then you can just click on that. We won't worry about that for the moment. Okay, so let's say I've approved those three bills. If I go to prepare payments, now this would be, I'm going to leave here. If this would be somebody else within the Treasury Department, somebody in the Accounts Department comes in on a different date, the 24th of November, of May, a few days later, and now they want to pay the invoice. You'll notice that we've got a ridiculously high balance here on in my bank balance, 23 million. Somebody must have been playing with my sample data account, but normally it's not going to be so high. And obviously what we want to do is you want to keep an eye on that balance to make sure that if you say, yeah, we're going to pay that one, you're going to pay that one, that the value of what you're paying doesn't drop down too far down. So that's how you do it. And then once you've done that, you just click on process, and it'll send out it'll process the payment, it'll send out the backs payment to the supplier, and it'll send the remittance to the supplier. Okay. Integration was another thing I wanted to talk about, was how we integrate. So here's a section here, just one of the integrations. This is what they do it in scenarios. So we have import scenarios, we have export scenarios. And the idea about a scenario is you effectively create the job, you say what the data is in Acumatica that you want to match with the data coming in. And those are the two scenarios that come in. So here you can see we've got a whole list of imports. We can import invoices, payments, suppliers prices, cash sale transactions. It just goes on and on and on. And these are ones that have been set up by the system, but there are any number of scenarios that you can create. Whatever you like. Every part of Acumatica can be imported into. Okay, so once I'm just going to open one of these. So this is import an invoice. So this could be the situation with you. Maybe this could be, say, importing Amex expense claims. And really all we do here is we're just doing a mapping. So we map from the one field. So let's say here's my vendor field, and I indicate what the opposite field is on the incoming file. And in some cases, I need some formulas. So that's why you can say equals this and equals is null and so on. So that's the import scenarios. And once you set those up, then you can process those. That little clock over there, that's a schedule. So I can get it to say, we'll go and select that file, process it every 5 minutes, update it, send a note to somebody that's all done. And that's how it works. And the same thing works with export scenarios. Now, there's also a web-based integration. Web-based integrations work slightly differently. There we have actually a login into Salesforce or whatever it is that you're connecting with, and it'll just pull the data through. That's fantastic. So the last part of this presentation on Acumatica is just quickly putting in an expense receipt. So I'm just going to grab my phone, which I've put onto the screen. So there it is. That's the Acumatica mobile application. As you can see, there are quite a lot of other applications within the system, within the mobile application. But all we're going to do is we're just going to create an expense receipt. We're going to create an expense receipt for a different employee. As I mentioned to you, I'm Maxwell Baker, but we're going to do it for employee number 10, Steve Church, and then we're going to have a look at how the expense comes in. So I'll just click on expense receipts, and I click on plus, and I have a receipt in front of me for 12 pounds. So let me just create a new thing. I'll just call it taxi to Heathrow. And the expense item is going to be business travel. All these expense items you can create within Acumatica. It just pulls through. Currency is going to be sterling. The amount is going to be 12. I can put more, and then there's an employee part which comes off, but I won't worry about that. Because I've got projects, I have to put in a project code. So I'll just put in this code over here. But as I mentioned, you may find that you want to use projects just to keep extra track of everything. Okay, so then I'm going to take a photograph of it and click on the camera. I have my camera, my phone over here, so I'll just take the camera. It doesn't have to be in focus because all I do is click this button here and it will take the photograph. Yeah, as you can see, it's not too Heathrow, it's too wooden, but that's still okay. So I'm just going to give it a tick over there. It just makes sure it's clear. I can make it darker or lighter. That's fine. And then I just click on over here, and that indicates that it passes up. And as I can see on my expense receipt, you can see it's under my to be claimed list of expense receipts. The concept here is you have a number of receipts, and then you then create an expense claim. And you can see I've got expense receipts that are pending approval. I don't have any at the moment, but that could be the case, or rejected, and I can interact that way around. And then I can create an expense claim, which is just a combination of expense receipts. Okay, so let's just go and have a look and see what that looks like on the on Acumatica itself. So I'm just going to go and have a look at Church and press Tab, and there we go. You can see there's the expense claim, that's the expense receipt that's come in. I can open it and have a look at it, but it's the same thing. And as you can see here, there's an indication that there is there's an attachment. I can just double click, open that up again, and there's my expense receipt. So that's nice and simple. And then once that happens, that gets approved and sent out, and it goes up. Eventually, it gets onto the employee's account, which is a payables account, like a creditor, and they get paid in the normal way. All right, well, that's where we're going to end the review of Acumatica. Just one final part to just take any questions that might have arisen. So I'm just going to move across onto that screen, and then we'll finish off. So we have a few questions that have come in. So does this only run on the web? Yes, it is only a web-based application, but as I mentioned before, you can run it from your own server, or you can choose, as many companies do, just to choose it to run it as a SaaS cloud operation option. What about VAT? Yes, Acumatica is fully VAT compliant, and in fact it's a fully configurable VAT system. So you can set it up for any country, which we have done a number of cases. And it has things like reverse VAT, and you can create EC sales lists and so on. So it has full VAT handling, different currencies, different VAT jurisdictions. Can you restrict people so they can only see their own branches? Yes, if you have got the branch set up like that, then those people can only see transactions. They can only do transactions in those particular branches. Can we create our own reports? Yes, the answer is yes. Can it pick up incoming email? That's a good question. So yes, as email comes in, you have a little attachment. If you're running Office 365 or Outlook connected to Office 365 or Exchange, then you just drag the email and just put it into a folder that's on the side there, and it connects up with Acumatica, and it'll put it against the supplier or the customer or whatever where you want to put the email. Can it handle foreign currency? Yes, it handles foreign currency very well, and in addition to that, it has an automatic download of exchange rates, so you just put a tick in the box and that's it. All the exchange rates come down as frequently as you want them. Can we get a demo to try? Yes, definitely. You can contact us and we will just set up a demo that is in tune or like your system, and then you can try it out. There's no problem about that. Can you export out of Acumatica? Yes, and specifically into Excel. We know accountants love putting things into Excel, so on any screen you might have seen the little X button, and it means you can export from there. But you can also use export scenarios, and what's also good about exporting into Excel is there might be some data you want to export and you want to come back to that data but refresh it. Well, there's an easy way. You can stay in Excel and then just click a data refresh, and it'll remember the Acumatica login. It'll just ask you for the password and it'll just pull the data down. You don't even have to be in Acumatica. Is the mobile application an extra feature or charge? I think the question there is, do you have to pay any more money for it? No, it's all part of the application, and in fact there's a developer's kit that you can use to add your own and to make some changes to it. Can you budget by sub-account segment? That's a really good question. So if you've got lots of sub-accounts and you've broken things down, you probably want to create budgets for sub-accounts and segments. Yes, you can. So you can break up the budget in that way. You can give it to the people who need to fill in the budgets on Excel. That comes back in again, and there's special approvals that pull them all together, and that becomes your final budget. You can have multiple budgets as well. Okay, well that's all we've got time for. I hope you've got a good understanding about how Acumatica works and how it is a great system for the food and beverage, health and leisure, and hospitality industries. I hope to hear from you. Just in terms of hearing from you, if you need any more information, please contact Emma Bevan, and those two addresses, Cloud Accounting or Tascoli. Cloud Accounting is our dedicated site for Acumatica. Tascoli is our own site. And of course, Acumatica's main website is acumatica.com. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to hear from you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.